Hello and welcome to the new Game Dev Club tutorial. This is the first tutorial of the 2015-2016 school year. So we're going to be making Space Invaders, which is actually pretty exciting. So I have this open for some reason. So let's head over to the new SSHS Game Dev website. Let's go to the download section and let's get some stuff. So you should already have Eclipse. I'm not going to re-download libgdx, but if you need to, let me just make sure this exists. Yes, okay. If you need to, you're going to go here. You're going to be in download already, and you're going to want to do download setup app. Alright, and that's all you need. Actually, you need some assets. I will be posting those soon, but I will be posting them when we need them, not right now, because we don't need them right now. So yeah, let's start with setting up our project. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new window of this. So Windows Explorer, put this over here, document, no, Game Dev Club actually, that's in documents. You're going to want to run your setup app, so whatever libgdx, use your most recent one. Here it is. Okay, so we're going to name the game Space Invaders. Okay, so you gotta make sure whenever you're making something, especially with a team, when you use your project, you gotta have the same package. So com.sshsgd.spaceinvaders. And of course, our convention for game class will always be game. We're not going to do iOS, HTML, or Android. We're not going to need Box2D. We're going to use controllers and free type. So we're going ahead and destination. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go into my passport and documents. Let's find Game Dev Club. Alright. So we're going to go ahead and make a new folder. We're going to call it Space Invaders. Now I'm going to call it tutorial. You don't have to include that. And that, make a folder called, highlight this, Control C that because we can use it later. Make it project. Alright. So make sure you go into advanced and you select Eclipse. That's very important. That generates all the files that Eclipse will read in order to make it a project and be able to run your code and whatnot. So go ahead and click generate, and it should start. We're gonna wait. So basically, Space Invaders, if you don't know, actually while we wait, I can show you guys the game. Space Invaders is a very classic arcade game, and I made a little demo for it for Game Development Club, Club Rush. Basically, you have your Space Invaders, and they come and they attack you, and they move sideways and they go down when they hit the side of the screen. So there's some other shit that shows up every couple seconds. And if you shoot them, they go faster. And you have these shield things at the bottom. As you can see, it's doing that, so we can exit. Alright, so that's Space Invaders, and this is done. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, go into where you made it and make sure you have your workspace folder. So, workspace. Control C that directory. Go into Eclipse. Click File. Switch Workspace. Other. Control C that. Make sure everything's correct. Click OK. Okay, so Eclipse should be doing this. You can close out of your project generator. You don't need that anymore. I'm waiting for Eclipse. It's being slow. That's alright. It's okay when programs are slow. Don't be too impatient. Okay, so we got Eclipse, which is great. So go ahead and File, Import. You're going to want General, Existing Projects into Workspace, Browse, click on your project folder, click OK. Make sure you got Core and Desktop. These are the two things you need. Click Finish. Okay. Wait for it to refresh your workspace and to build the workspace. Alright, so your project should be ready. You can go ahead and open up your desktop, your My Desktop, and give it a run. Let's make a run configuration just for it. So Java application, go ahead over here and just name it desktop. Or you can run it, you can name it, name it desktop. Because once we start making Android games and stuff, we're going to have two run configurations, one for Android and one for desktop. Make sure the main class here says .desktop launcher, because as you can see, there are a few stuff that libgdx comes with that lets you run things. So if you selected tools in the project setup, there's even more stuff. So hit apply and run. Now make sure it looks like this. Game is up in the corner. It's got its little, I think it's the OpenGL logo, the Bad Logic Games logo right here on a red background. So make sure you go in here and you got your game.java. If you want, you can make it package presentations hierarchical. So that'll be in view menu, package presentation hierarchical, to make our packages look nice and organized. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the MyConstants class, which is a class that I don't think we used in Pong, but it's an important concept that you need to get. Most companies that have big projects have a class or an object similar to this called MyConstants, or not MyConstants, but whatever their naming convention is. I call it MyConstants. It's where you hold all your things that pretty much don't change or they're static. If you don't remember, static means that that it's one instance and one instance only. So you cannot call new on a static object. So it's has a shared instance throughout the entire program. Universal is another good way to say. So if you remember from Pong, we would do this a lot. Public static final int blah equals a number. Now this concept, and you have like called 2 and whatever 3. Now this concept here is called an enumerization. So an enumerization is pretty much having a list of items or constants with a number assigned to them. This is good for our input class, where we have the numbers that represent the keys, and those numbers represent index in an array. But Java comes with this neat little type it's called an enum. So you can do public static enum, and we're going to call this states. This will be our game states, by the way. And now these don't assign numbers to the enum, but they're just there. So if you don't really need to get it from, if you don't need it to represent an index to an array or whatever, you can use enum. Now enum's great. You can actually make an enum file, just an entire file that represents an enum. But we're going to keep this in MyConstants. So splash title play game over. Make sure you can spell. Alright, so we got splash title play and game over. Now we're going to have a public static string save file. Now I'm also going to teach you guys about making save file, like making high scores that can be saved. For now we're only going to have one savable high score, but that's enough. So Space Invaders .sav, you can name it whatever you want. We're going to go with that. Now we're going to do some directions, so we don't actually need any of that. So we're going to go ahead and have a public static final int world size. This is another concept. We're going to do our world sizes. So width equals 350. Now this is how many pixels the game will actually be. No matter how big the window is, the game resizes to that. Resizes to this screen. It stretches it out. This is good to make it playable on any screen, any resolution. You want to get used to doing something like this when you get into Android development, because basically every single Android phone has a different screen size and different resolution. There are other ways to do it other than just stretching the viewport. You can fit the viewport, fill the viewport. There are different ways to do it, but we're going to use stretch for now. I'll talk about that in the next video. So final int world height. We're going to make this a square. Now if you remember, I said that when the Space Invaders go across the game world, they'll go down. So for Space Invaders, we want our HUD, our heads-up display, and our game itself in basically two different areas. So to do this, I made a game width, which is the width of the actual events going on in the game, and we're going to set that to 275. Now, since we're going to be using controllers, we're going to have some controller mappings. I'm going to do this to an Xbox controller. So Xbox mappings, this pretty much sets everything. This is where we use an enumerization with number values, because these are buttons with their button code as the numbers. So public static final int, we're going to copy this. So our first button is A, and that would be 0. Our next button is B, equal to 1. Next button is X, is equal to 2. Y is 3. Left button is 4. Right button is 5. Oops. RB equals 5. We want back is equal to 6. Start is equal to 7, and then L3 is equal to 8, and R3 is equal to 9. So the triggers are not buttons. They don't have a button code. They're actually considered an axis. So I think right is positive and left is negative, something like that. So we don't really need some of this stuff, so I'm just going to get it out. I'm not going to use it. So okay, so our next constant will actually be a method. So public static color. So Control-Shift-M on color, and make sure you're importing from com.badlogic.gdx.graphics.color. We're using that color. We're going to make a random color. I don't know if we used random colors before, but we're just going to return a new color, and mathutils.random. So basically how colors work is that there's an R value, a G value, a B value, and an A value. R is red, G is green, B is blue, and A is alpha. Alpha is its transparency. Now usually it's an integer between 0 and 255. 255 meaning there's more of that value and less of it. But in libgdx they decided to make it a floating number between 0 and 1, so it's more of a percentage. So there's this much red. It's 50% red. So it's in between. You can just make a random number between 0 and 1, and it will make this random color effect. Now, I made a method in here once because I was tired of using the between 0 and 1 because it's frustrating, it's not very visual, and it's not very standard. Standard is to use the 255 value. So static RGBA, so this is a color actually, color RGBA, and it's going to take in a float. Float R, float G, float B, and float A. Now you can return a new value, or a new color, and it's going to be R over 255F. So basically it's the ratio. So it's what is R out of 255, and that will give us the number that's between 0 and 1. So G over 255F, B over 255F, and A over 255F. Now remember that F is pretty much telling the compiler to make sure that this 255 is regarded as a floating point, not an integer. So it doesn't return 0 every time. Alright, so now our next method will be a float clamp. Float n, float min, float max. So basically what this means is that it's going to, you can just make that return null for now, or 0. Okay, you make that return 0 for now so that the Eclipse doesn't bother you. So clamp basically means that we're going to have a number, and it's going to have a minimum value, and it's going to have a maximum value, and if it's less than the minimum, it sets it to the minimum, and if it's greater than the maximum, it sets it to the maximum. So let's do some, I'm just going to do a multi-line comment here. Let's say we have float x equals math utils.random, whatever, 100. But we only want it, now this is obviously not a good example, but say we want it to be between 60 and 75. So x is equal to MyConstants.clamp, and you plug in x, and then you put 60, and then you put 75, and then it'll set x to, if it's greater than 75, it's set x to 75, and if it's less than 60, it'll set x to 60, and if it's in between those two, it won't touch it. So to do this, we're just going to go ahead and do a float r equals n. So we're making a local variable within the method and setting it to the variable that you take in. So we're going to do if r is less than min. So if the r is less than the minimum value that you're given it, r is equal to min. And then you're going to do if r is greater than min, or greater than max, actually. You're going to do r is equal to max. And then you're going to return r. So we're also going to make an integer version of this, just in case we don't want a floating number. So public integer clamp, and we're going to make sure it takes in integers. And it does the same thing. So just copy and paste and replace everything that says float with integer. And you can do that. Our next objective here is to make our get score. So public static, everything's static in here. String get score int score. So this I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the game again. If you see here in the game, the scores have zeros before them. This is just like a formatting string text, make it look more whatever. So return, for now we're just gonna return empty string. Alright, so if score is less than 10, then return 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros plus 4. Alright, so now we can do else, and we can copy this. Actually, so we're going to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. So we're gonna add a 0 here and remove a 0 here. We're gonna add 2 zeros here and remove 2 zeros here. Then add 3 zeros, remove 3, until we just return blank. Make sure we just because we can't return an integer when it's a string. This will try to return an integer, so we have to force it to be a string by concatenating double quotes, empty double quotes into it. So this is in case someone is really good at Space Invaders and they get beyond, what is that, 10,000 points, I believe. Yes, okay. So there's other stuff that I have in this MyConstants class, because I just copied and pasted it from another program that I made. But we don't need it in Space Invaders, so we can go ahead and just leave this how it is. And that will be that. So, thanks for watching. Tune in next time. We'll be making the camera class, and I will be explaining to you viewports, because that's a very important concept that I didn't get into last year with Pong, because we really didn't need to. But as we start making more advanced games, and start making them for Android, because that's something I do plan for this year, we do need to understand viewports. So stay tuned for that. I will see you guys later, and yeah, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.